Well, hello there. Greeting words are probably the first word you learn in any new language, and even if you don't know a language, you might know or at least recognize the most common greeting word. Like I just said, hello, a common English greeting. There's also konnichiwa, a common Japanese greeting word, or hola, a Spanish greeting word. Today, I'm here to talk about talking. Well, language and communication. But first, I have to introduce myself. My name is Dime, and I am in my first year of college. For my English class, I was tasked with making a multimodal presentation, which means basically anything that's not a written essay. I've decided to dabble in video creation, my attempt at a video essay. With that, I bring you language, a slightly deep dive. The first definition of language listed on Google is provided by the Oxford Languages and says, quote, the principal method of human communication consisting of words used in a structured and conventional way and conveyed by speech, writing, or gesture. Spoken languages have appeared all over the world. As a person who has spent most of their life in the state of California, when I think of a widely spoken language that isn't English, my first thought is Spanish. Spanish gets its namesake from the country of origin, Spain. The interesting thing about Spanish is that it appears in so many different cultures all over the world. And while they all started out as the same one language, the language has developed into different dialects and variants. Side note, the reason why Spanish is such a popular language is because Spain colonized and forced their culture and language on many other cultures around the world. Literally every continent excluding Australia and Antarctica. According to Rubric.com, there's 29 variants of Spanish, but those 29 listed only account for the different countries that speak Spanish and do not account for the regional differences within one country. A term I've heard and used a lot throughout my high school years was textbook Spanish, which to me has always meant the form of Spanish they teach in school. It usually has no location and community-based expressions and grammar. It's the most generic Spanish. Rubric.com calls this variant Universal Spanish. Spanish is an umbrella term for the 29 plus variants we just talked about, just like language is an umbrella term for different forms of communication. If you don't know, umbrella term is defined as a term used to cover a broad category of things rather than a specific items. The thing with language is it has to come from something. And behind the words and phrases and structures of the English language are the stories that inspired their usage. If you've been on Instagram or TikTok within the past year, you might recognize the username Etymology Nerd. Etymology Nerd, real name Adam Alexic, has a Harvard linguist degree and has hundreds of videos regarding different languages and speech patterns. He provides a very interesting perspective and has opened my eyes to how many words have stories behind them. Of course, throughout school, I've learned that a lot of English words have Latin or Greek root words, such as words like dictation and dictionary, which have the Latin root word dict, which means to speak. But a lot of Etymology Nerds' content is actually analyzing new words and how they are used within a modern context, or how modern times have influenced new definitions for older words. I wanted to mention Etymology Nerd as he has been the influence for a lot of the points I'm mentioning in this video, and I wanted to give credit where credit is due. But the English language and its variants don't all stem from old words from several of hundreds of years ago. Some are very new, only spanning several generations, not centuries. AAVE, or African American Vernacular English, is a well-known variant of the English language. Its origin isn't quite known, but it is most present in urban communities spoken by middle-class Black people.
I guess kind of, sort of, but it's cool because I grew up here, so I know how to maneuver around this motherfucker.
But every time you come to this little event, you know what I'm saying? I'm doing it big for my city, man.
Some bad luck wanna come to you, I promise you, man. And this way Pop used to get the switches off the tree.
If you spend any time on the internet, you might recognize some AAVE words, such as gyat or finna, that have been taken and turned into popular internet slang. As we look through the past few decades, it's very often that we see aspects of Black communities in America picked up as trends. As the cycle goes, symbols of Black communities are seen as unclassy. Then, whatever it is, whether that be chunky hoop earrings or a way of speaking, is picked up by mainstream culture. That's how we end up with popular white influencers saying things like, I finna be in the pit, or rich white boys saying her yeah is insane, which is all incorrect usage of AAVE. For the sake of transparency, I will let you know that I am a white person who did not grow up in a community that spoke AAVE. As we just looked at, different communities can cause variance in language, but so can different mediums of communication. In the early days of the internet, circa 1970s, there was a rise in the use of abbreviations. This is because it's a lot easier to type out TTYL rather than the full phrase, talk to you later. It also became more convenient when handheld phones were more popular and more common, and the full keyboard was not available on said phones. With computers, we also see the rise of emoticons, although people have been expressing happiness with two dots and a line for hundreds of years. The point is, English went through some adaptation in order to be more convenient to use on the internet. Another interesting thing about language is how it changes throughout generations. As time goes on, some words become obsolete, while others stick despite no longer meaning the same thing they originally meant. There's fossil words, like bide and bide your time, that only make sense because of the understanding of the phrase. The use of the word bide has died out over time. Meanwhile, there's words like uppercase and lowercase, which refer to the written English language. The upper and lower cases refer to the time of the printing press, when letters were individual keys and the uppercase letters were held in the, you guessed it, uppercase. Same applies for the lowercase with lowercase letters. We also see differences throughout generations as words and phrases become popular. That's why a millennial might use the word do it for the vine, while a Gen Zer like myself might say do it for the bit. While we see language vary between different generations, it can also be observed on different personal levels and personal relationships. While I don't think these personal languages can be viewed as a new language on its own, in the same way that English and Spanish are categorized, it is still common to have new speech patterns only used within certain relationships and in certain circumstances. I got this idea from Amy Tan's mother tongue, who said that her and her mother had a very specific way of talking. For them, it was like a love language. Amy Tan's mother, Daisy Lee, spoke in broken English, and that pattern became their main language that they talked with each other in. Amy Tan wrote, "Just last week, I was walking down the street with my mother, and I again found myself conscious of the English I was using, the English I do use with her. We were talking about the price of new and used furniture, and I heard myself saying this, quote, not waste money that way, end quote. My husband was with us as well, and he didn't notice any switch in my English, and then I realized why. It's because over the 20 years we've been together, I've often used the same kind of English with him, and sometimes he even uses it with me. It has become our language of intimacy, a different sort of English that relates to family talk, the language I grew up with." End quote. I love how Amy Tan expresses this experience. She explains that despite her mother's broken English, she has a large understanding of the English language and interacts with the English language in many ways. Quote, "To me, my mother's English is perfectly clear, perfectly natural. It's my mother tongue. Her language, as I hear it, is vivid, direct, full of observation and imagery. That was the language that helped shape the way I saw things, expressed things, made sense of the world." So far, we've only really looked at spoken languages, but there are plenty of non-spoken languages that are very much alive and used as forms of communication. Take coding. It's a mixture of symbols and words that can be named and spoken out loud, but the pure purpose of coding languages is to communicate between computers. The fun thing about coding is that even though it is a non-spoken language, it can be used to create spoken languages. Take text to speech. It has an algorithm that converts written language into audible language, or Google Translate, which also has a coded algorithm that is able to do those translations from one language into another. As for unconventional languages, I would also consider dance languages as well. Ballet, contemporary salsa, etc. all have their own conventions and structures that they follow. Dance is often used to convey a story or to communicate. Take, for example, the all-time famous ballet The Nutcracker, which is a timeless example of how dance can tell a story and how dance can communicate between dancers or performers and audience. Language is complex and cannot be defined into one simple box. Being the byproduct of thousands of years of human evolution, language is not only diverse, but everywhere. It plays an important role into every aspect of daily lives. Our languages play a large role into how we view the world, how societies run, and how the world progresses. Language has been and always will be the best tool humanity has. And with that, I say thank you for your time and goodbye.